Of yet another buzzing news story. This time, Elon is not the main attraction.
Tech publication Wired ran a story Sunday profiling 6 young engineers titled "The Young, Inexperienced Engineers Aiding Elon Musk's Government Takeover." The outlet writes, Wired has identified 6 young men, all apparently between the ages of 19 and 24, according to public databases, their online presences, and other records, who have little to no government experience, and are now playing critical roles in Musk's so-called Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, project, tasked by executive order with modernizing federal technology and software to maximize governmental efficiency and productivity.
Fortunately, screenshots circulating online from a Reddit forum titled "White People Twitter" appear to contain users calling for the doxing and the death of these engineers.
This whole saga has sparked U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Ed Martin, to issue a letter to Musk.
On X, Martin wrote, "Dear Elon, please see this important letter. We will not tolerate threats against DOGE workers or law-breaking by the disgruntled. All the best, Ed Martin." The letter reads in part, "Let me assure you of this. We will pursue any and all legal action against anyone who impedes your work or threatens your people. We will not act like the previous administration, who looked the other way as the Antifa and BLM rioters, as well as thugs with guns, trashed our capital city."
One engineer whom Wired featured in their story seems to be making the rounds on X for decoding a passage on an ancient scroll.
His name is Luke Ferrator. Here he is.
So I've always been interested in history. Growing up, I learned Latin. I was never that good at it, but I was always kind of into that sort of stuff, read a lot about the Roman Empire and things. And one day I was just listening to a podcast back in March. It was with Nat Friedman. He just kind of got on the podcast, explained like there are these burnt up scrolls that were buried in the Pompeii eruption. No one knows how to read them, but some professors have created CT scans of these scrolls, and they uploaded the data on the internet as a competition to see who could find writing inside of these scrolls. And when I heard that, I was just immediately like, oh my goodness, this is such a cool project. I have to work on this. I just went home from work that day at the end of the day, and I've been working on it evenings and weekends ever since.
Of course, X was filled with reactions. Partner at venture capital firm A16Z wrote, "It actually makes perfect sense to have a team of cracked Zoomers on DOGE. You want people who look at a system and say, this sucks, let's start from scratch, not how can I work in this bureaucracy to further my career? Can you imagine if it were Google employees instead?" Tech writer Nick Carter wrote, "DOGE did something incredible. For the first time in decades, working for the government is now a high prestige activity for elite human capital."
Meanwhile, on Blue Sky, international relations professor Nicholas Grossman responded to the story by writing, "FYI, doxing is unethical regarding someone posting on social media, aims to harass and intimidate them because of what they said. Making the American public aware of who is attacking the U.S. government from within is not that." Journalist D. Earl Stevens wrote, "Stop calling it DOGE and start calling it coup."
So what do you think, Linda?
Those are some heavy statements from people on
Yes,
both
and
sides.
people are threatening. I saw a Baylor University professor accusing these 6 young men of treason and that they should be wanted dead or alive, and threatening them in all sorts of ways. I think that is mostly just heated rhetoric and not true threats of violence, so I don't think law enforcement need to follow up or anything like that. But it is vile, in my view, to wish for death on anyone, including a bunch of younger people who are working for DOGE to help make the government more effective. These seem like very impressive young people that I feel bad for them, or don't have necessarily media training or are ready for the spotlight that Wired just thrust upon them. Is it doxing to reveal that these are the people involved in DOGE, which is having some government project? I don't think that counts as doxing in my view, so I wouldn't necessarily say that the article should be suppressed, because I think the American people should have the right to know about that. However, I am supportive of what they do. This goes back a little bit to the conversation we were having earlier with, on one side, the kind of the young rebels being more in the MAGA environment, people who see things differently and want to work on big projects, and then the other side, the mom archetype, or the rule followers, the university professor saying, oh no, this is not how we do things in the federal government. Like, well, that's the attitude that's gotten us in this mess, and maybe it's going to take a different attitude to make government more efficient for the American people.
I have zero problems with brilliant young people getting involved in the federal government. And in fact, during the Obama years, the tech version of that was the founders of Facebook being involved in both the design of...
Yeah, that's a good point. That used to not be deemed election interference of any kind. If you had, like, the co-founder of Facebook helped go to the Obama campaign to help Obama do more success on Facebook.
Exactly.
Yes,
Look, I think talent is important, and we should recruit talent to the federal government. However, I don't think that it is problematic that Wired has released the names of these individuals. I mean, the thing is, when you are a federal employee, it is publicly accessible information. That is how we keep all of those individuals who swear to defend and promote the Constitution. That's how we keep them accountable, because they are in service of the American people. Now, obviously, I don't think that anybody should be threatening them any more than they should be threatening elections officials, as we saw happen after 2016. But when you come into federal service, you have to know that you're going to be part of the public, awareness and its potential that you're going to be in front of people and ask questions about exactly what you do. Now, what's unclear to me is, are they actually government employees, which is a whole different discussion, right? I mean, I think what you're hearing Democrats really push back against is access to confidential, classified information. And importantly, you heard Congressman Khanna say a little bit earlier, the private, personal identifying information, PII is the term in the federal government, for hundreds of millions of Americans as part of the Treasury system.
Maybe Elon can tell me what my social security number is. I seem to have forgotten. Maybe this could be helpful. No, I can't. Look, I understand the concerns that people have right now about, someone who is not elected, sure, being, having such a direct role in the operations of the federal government. I would respond to that by saying, well, a lot of the staffers at this vast federal bureaucracy are also not elected, and they work for people who are not elected. And the conservative criticism of a lot of these institutions is that they vastly operate outside their mandate or outside real congressional oversight. Look, we have all these departments with all these people in it, career civil servants whose policies are continuous regardless of which political party comes to power. So Trump's view is that this career civil service is hostile to the project of MAGA conservatism and needs to be rooted out to some degree in order to have the government operate in line with what he ran on. That is going to involve buyouts for federal employees. That was one policy. Making them actually come to work is another, because a lot of them are going to quit over that, even though most people in the private sector have to show up for work at least a good amount of the time, and other steps that are being taken to find ways to make the government more efficient. This is the only way to grapple with the multi-headed hydra that is the federal government. It's very clear. There's no surprise. It's exactly what they ran on doing, that the institutions need to be brought under control. The DEI is going to be, we're going to rid ourselves of it. And you can't. It's hard to make working at the government cool and attractive to bright, brilliant young people, especially if they have to sit through the kinds of DEI sort of training or whatever training you have to do at large organizations, including the federal government.
I feel like you've told me twice now that I'm not cool.
This is not coming out of me. You seem very cool. Linda.
Working for the federal government is cool, for the record, and especially depending on the kinds of things you get to work on. So probably that was a lot, and so I'm going to try and pull back on a couple of these things, or push back gently on a couple of these things. So first of all, I don't think it's about whether people are elected or not. I mean, the fact remains, Elon Musk is the richest man on earth who, when you're a billionaire, just for people's edification here, you have a whole network of different entities and organizations that are under your power. You find ways to hide some of them. You find ways to promote and make money on others, right? And part of what I think is an issue here is not the fact that he's not elected, it's that he isn't deconflicted. That is why we've had for so long very strong regulations in place that say if you are going to work in the federal government where you may profit from the information you have access from, where you may be able to then turn whatever it is that you do as part of the federal government into something private sector and profit making in the future, that's a problem. You're supposed to divest. There's a whole different discussion to be had about that. The other thing is, I don't think everybody in the federal government, and certainly not the 2 million civil service employees that have been the hot topic of debate recently, they don't have access to this kind of information. In fact, the reason I brought up the term PII is because it is a very bright red line within the federal government, and what that bright line tells you is who is allowed to access it and who is not. And so the idea of these young people who, again, may or may not be actual federal government employees being able to come in and access really private information that, impacts hundreds of millions of Americans. That is what I think is truly problematic here. You heard the congressman earlier also talking about the ability to decide based on whatever metrics or filters that they have either at DOGE or that they're going to create at some point in the near future. Whatever they decide they don't want to actually follow through on, this gives them the power to do that.
Up next, Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna joins Rising for an interview. Stay tuned.